Hello, and welcome back to Lacrim Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, settle in, clear your mind, let the outside world slip away, and let's begin. Story 1. I hesitate to write this under my real name. Even now, reading it back, it sounds ridiculous. If someone else told me this story a few months ago, I would have smiled politely and blamed stress, bad sleep, maybe an overactive imagination. But after what happened in my apartment last month, I don't feel confident anymore about what is just an object and what isn't. I used to believe furniture was furniture. Wood was wood. You buy it, you assemble it, you sleep on it, and that's the end of it. This started with a bed, not an antique passed down in a family, not something pulled out of a haunted house in the countryside, just a bed I ordered online, the way anyone does when they want to upgrade their apartment and feel like they're moving forward in life. It was a handmade queen-size bed made from reclaimed Brazilian hardwood. The seller called it Peroba Rosa. I remember the name because it sounded expensive and important, like something you'd hear in a documentary about forests and old craftsmanship. The listing had that kind of language too. It called the bed rustic, ancestral, and crafted to transform your bedroom into a sanctuary of peace and elegance. I should have laughed at that. I didn't. I was tired, stressed, and I wanted my home to feel calmer. I wanted the bedroom to feel like a place where I could actually rest. When you live in a city like Sao Paulo, you start to crave that idea of a sanctuary, even if it's just marketing. The words hit the right part of my brain at the right time, and the photos were beautiful. Too beautiful. At the time, I thought they looked cinematic. The lighting was warm and golden, like a scene from a movie where nothing bad ever happens. The wood looked perfectly aged, with smooth edges and deep color. The shadows were dramatic in a way that made the bed look like it belonged in a magazine. Everything about it felt designed, not just photographed. Looking back, I realized that the images barely looked real at all. They didn't look like someone's actual bedroom. They looked like an imitation of comfort created by something that had studied human taste without fully understanding it, like a fake memory of a cozy room. Still, I bought it. The listing said the bed came from the mountains of Minas Gerais. That detail made it sound even more special. Reclaimed hardwood from somewhere old and wild. Something with history. Something ancestral, like the seller promised. I pictured a quiet place, mist in the hills, trees cut long ago, wood saved and reused, given a second life as a beautiful piece of furniture. When it finally arrived at my apartment in São Paulo, my first feeling wasn't excitement. It was unease. I can't explain it in a way that will satisfy anyone. There was no clear warning sign. Nothing jumped out and screamed danger. It was just the feeling you get when you open a door at the wrong time and the air inside is wrong. Like you stepped into a room where an argument had just ended, even if no one is there. The delivery workers left several heavy packages wrapped in plastic and cardboard. When we cut everything open, the smell hit me first. Not the scent of fresh wood or clean varnish. It smelled damp and old, like something stored underground. Like wet soil. Like a cellar that hasn't been opened in years. It didn't smell rotten exactly, but it smelled like time. The frame pieces were unbelievably heavy. I remember lifting one side and feeling my arms strain more than they should have. It wasn't just solid, it was dense in a way that made me think of stone. But when we laid out the slats underneath, they felt oddly thin and light. That contrast didn't make sense. The outer frame felt like it belonged to something massive and stubborn, while the parts that were supposed to support a mattress felt fragile, almost hollow. I said so out loud. My husband looked at me like I was trying to start a problem where none existed. He told me I was overthinking it. He said it was a nice bed and that I always got anxious when we bought something expensive. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He just wanted to get it done, set it up, and move on. So we assembled it. We followed the instructions, tightened the bolts, lined up the joints. The whole time my skin felt a little tight, like my body was expecting something. I kept noticing the smell even when I told myself not to. It didn't fade the way normal smells do. It stayed in the room like it belonged there. When we finally finished and placed the mattress on top, I tried to relax. I told myself the hard part was over. It was just a bed. We would sleep, wake up, and in a few days it would feel normal. That was the beginning. The first night, I noticed the bed didn't creak the way normal furniture does. Most beds make small sounds when you shift your weight. This didn't. It did something else. It reverberated. The best way I can describe it is this. Every movement sent a slow wave through the entire structure. It wasn't a quick squeak. It was like the bed took your movement and turned it into a deep, long vibration that traveled from one corner to another. It felt less like lying on a piece of furniture and more like lying on something huge beneath the floorboards, something that had its own weight and rhythm. I joked about it once, because joking was easier than saying I was scared. I said it felt like we were sleeping on the back of a giant animal. My husband laughed and told me I watched too many strange videos online. Then he rolled over and went to sleep. I tried to do the same. At first, it was subtle. It was the kind of thing you might blame on a passing truck or construction somewhere nearby. The city is full of noise and movement. But the sensation wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from under me, from inside the bed itself. Then it became impossible to ignore. Around 2 a.m., I woke up, not slowly, not gently, but in that sudden way where your eyes open and your body is already tense, like it heard something before your mind caught up. The room was dark. The air felt heavy, and the bed was vibrating. Not shaking violently, that would have been easier to explain. This was worse. Slow pulses, deep, steady, like something shifting in the earth, like tectonic plates moving under pressure, except the movement was traveling through the mattress into my bones. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It happened again the next night, and the next. Almost always around 2 a.m. I would wake up with my heart beating too fast, lying perfectly still, and trying to decide whether it was real. The first few times, I got out of bed and walked around thinking maybe the building was settling, or maybe a neighbor was doing something strange. I pressed my hand against the wall. Nothing. I stepped onto the floor. Solid. Normal. Quiet. Then I would place my hand on the bed frame, and I could feel it. A low vibration deep inside the wood. If I lay down again, it felt stronger, like the bed wanted me on it. I told my husband. He half woke up, listened for a minute, then said he couldn't feel anything. He pulled me close and told me to stop scaring myself. Sometimes he said it was probably traffic. Sometimes he said it was the air conditioner. Sometimes he said I was grinding my teeth and imagining it. I don't blame him. If you sleep through something, it's hard to believe it's there. But I wasn't imagining the way my body reacted. I started dreading bedtime. My shoulders stayed tight all day. By evening, I felt tired in a way that didn't match what I'd done. Like I was bracing myself for something every night and never fully relaxing afterward. We tried practical solutions first. We checked the bolts. We made sure the frame was level. We moved the bed slightly, repositioned it, checked the legs. Nothing changed. The vibration always came back. At one point, after another night where I woke at 2 a.m. with that slow, pulsing movement under me, I decided maybe the center beam was unstable. Maybe the bed was heavy and the support was weak, creating some kind of flex that I was mistaking for vibration. It sounded reasonable, and I needed something reasonable. So we tried reinforcing the frame by stacking books beneath the center beam. We used thick books, old textbooks, hardcovers, anything with weight. We built a neat little support column. It looked ridiculous, but I didn't care. I just wanted one quiet night. It changed nothing. If anything, the bed seemed to absorb the knowledge. That sounds insane, but that's the honest feeling I had the next night. The vibration didn't lessen. It felt more focused, like the bed had found a better way to move, like it had adjusted, like it had learned. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I hadn't seen at first because I hadn't been looking closely. One morning, while cleaning, I crouched down to pick up a sock that had slipped under the frame. When I leaned close, I saw dark stains underneath. Not surface stains, not something spilled and wiped away. These were deep black grooves in the wood itself, like the darkness was inside the grain. I ran my fingers over one spot and felt a slight dip, a softness where there shouldn't have been softness. The wood was supposed to be strong hardwood. It should have felt solid all the way through. But this felt like something had eaten at it from within. That bothered me so much that I disassembled part of the structure. I didn't take the whole bed apart, just enough to look at the pieces more closely. In certain areas, the fibers had been eaten away, leaving thin cracks and depressions, so dark they seemed to swallow light. The blackness wasn't just a color. It looked like depth, like a narrow opening into something. There were also tiny holes everywhere. At first, I thought maybe it was insects, some kind of beetle damage, old wood, reclaimed material. That's the risk you take with anything rustic. But the holes were too clean in some places and too irregular in others. Some parts looked burned around the edges. Other parts looked wet, as if the wood had been soaked and never fully dried. The overall look wasn't like a piece of furniture made in a workshop. It looked like something excavated. The strangest part was how quickly it changed. Within a week, areas that looked only a little dark began to develop deeper discoloration. It spread like bruising. The wood underneath felt damp even though the room itself was dry. I checked for leaks. I checked the wall. I checked the floor. There was no water problem in the apartment. And then there was the dust. Every time I touched the frame, a fine powder came off on my hands. It wasn't like normal sawdust. It was too fine, too dry, almost like ash, but it didn't smell like smoke. It got into the air easily. When I cleaned, the cloth came away dirty no matter how many times I wiped. The dust gathered under the bed in a way I couldn't explain. It was like the bed was producing it. My hands became so dry that the skin cracked around my fingernails. It stung when I washed them. My nose burned whenever I got close to the frame, like I had inhaled something sharp. I started sneezing in the bedroom, even though I don't have allergies. When I woke up in the mornings, my throat felt raw. I kept comparing it to my old bed, a simple pine frame we'd had for 5 years. That bed had been ordinary in every way. No mold, no strange smells, no movement. It didn't demand attention. It just existed. This thing didn't feel like that. This thing felt alive. I tried to explain this to myself in normal words. I told myself it was just poor quality. I told myself the wood had hidden damage. I told myself the bed was settling and the frame was warping. I tried to make it fit into the world I understood, but every night at 2 a.m., the bed pulsed beneath us, like a slow heartbeat. After another week of bad sleep and growing dread, I contacted the seller. That's when the whole situation turned surreal. At first, the responses came through a typical customer support chat. You know the style. Polite, scripted, a little too cheerful. But these messages felt wrong. They sounded almost human, but not entirely. The words were warm in a way that didn't match the problem I was describing. I wrote about vibrations, about stains, about holes, about dampness and dust. The replies kept circling back to comfort, tranquility, elegance. This bed will transform your bedroom into a cozy sanctuary. The cheerfulness felt forced, like a smile held too long, and the phrases were too personal, too intimate for a customer service script. It was as if the support agent was talking to me like a close friend, or like someone trying to calm a child. Meanwhile, every night the frame beneath me sounded like continents shifting. Eventually, my case was transferred to someone named Luan, or something named Luan. To this day, I honestly don't know what Luan was. It could have been a human representative. It could have been an AI system trained on customer service language. It could have been a person using AI tools. It could have been something else entirely. I only know how it felt to read the messages, like someone on the other side wasn't surprised by what I was saying. Luann never asked normal questions, not the kind a real furniture seller would ask, like whether the screws were tight, whether the floor was level, whether we had checked the mattress. Luann didn't sound confused. Luann sounded like someone following a procedure. The instructions came slowly, step by step, and they were oddly specific. Please wrap the entity securely for pickup. I stared at that word for a long time. I told myself it was a translation issue. Maybe in Portuguese the word was different and it had been translated badly into English. Maybe it was a template. Maybe it was a mistake. But the message didn't look like a mistake. It looked intentional. The next message said, "Protect the corners." Then, "Request a collection receipt." It read, less like "we are picking up your bed," and more like "we are removing something that must be contained." I showed my husband. He raised his eyebrows, laughed a little, and said it was probably just a weird auto-translation. He was still trying to keep it normal. But he agreed we should return the bed. At that point, even he was tired of the vibration and the smell. So we followed the instructions exactly. We bought heavy plastic wrap and wrapped the frame pieces tightly. We taped everything down. We used cardboard to protect the corners like we were shipping glass. We kept everything neat and careful. The whole time I had this feeling that I was doing something ritual-like without meaning to. Like I was repeating steps someone else had decided long ago. Steps meant to keep something from leaking out. The night before the pickup, we were exhausted beyond reason. My husband had started waking up too, not always at 2 a.m., but enough that he couldn't dismiss it anymore. He didn't want to talk about it, but I could see it in his face in the mornings. The tiredness, the irritation, the way he avoided looking at the bed frame in daylight. That night, we abandoned the bed completely. We placed the mattress directly on the floor and pushed the wrapped frame pieces to the side of the room, near the door, ready for collection. The bedroom looked wrong without the bed assembled, like an empty stage after the set has been removed. There was a strange openness to the room, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. And that was when the truly horrifying thing happened. Silence, no vibrations, no low pulsing. No movement creeping through the mattress. No sense that the building itself was shifting. Just normal quiet. Just gravity. Just the weight of my body on the floor. My husband fell asleep almost instantly, like he'd been waiting for permission to rest. Within minutes, his breathing changed, deeper and steadier. He didn't even toss and turn. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to how ordinary the room sounded. The distant city noise. A faint hum from somewhere in the building. A dog barking far away. Tiny, normal sounds that had always been there but had been drowned out by that constant low-frequency motion. That's when I realized how much I had adapted. Not in a healthy way, but in the way people adapt to bad conditions when they have to. My body had started accepting the vibration as part of reality, part of sleep, part of home. And the moment it stopped, I understood how wrong it had been, because the absence of it felt like stepping out of a room full of invisible smoke. I kept thinking about the frame pieces wrapped in plastic near the door. I kept imagining that slow movement continuing inside them, muted by the layers of wrap, like something breathing under a blanket. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I just wanted morning to come. When sunlight finally leaked into the room, it felt like relief. Around mid-morning, 4 men arrived to remove the bed. 4. It was a queen-size bed frame. Yes, and it was heavy, but it didn't seem like it required 4 adult men, unless it was heavier than normal, or unless the pickup company had been told something specific. They were quiet and efficient. They didn't make small talk. They didn't complain. They didn't look confused by the way the frame was wrapped. They lifted the pieces like they'd done it before. As they carried it through the hallway, I heard something. A deep crack from somewhere inside the wrapped frame. Not the sharp snap of normal wood, not the sound of a screw loosening. This was lower, older, slower, like a shift, like pressure releasing, like earth moving. All 4 men paused for a fraction of a second. Not long enough for my husband to notice, maybe, but long enough for me to see it. They exchanged quick looks, then kept going. No one said a word. I stood in the doorway and watched them disappear into the elevator with it. The hallway felt suddenly brighter, like something dense had been removed from the air. For the first time since the bed arrived, my apartment felt like my apartment again. The marketplace refunded me a week later. The message was cheerful, full of apologies and warm wishes. It sounded like nothing unusual had happened, like the whole thing was just a normal return. But I don't sleep the same anymore. Sometimes late at night, especially when the air is humid, I wake up around 2 a.m. with that familiar sense of dread. There's no vibration under me now. The floor is still. The bed we replaced it with is ordinary. But my body remembers, in those moments, I can't stop thinking about where that frame went. I picture it sitting in a warehouse somewhere, stacked among other returned items, under buzzing lights. Or I picture it being loaded onto a truck and taken back to the mountains of Minas Gerais, back to the place the listing mentioned so proudly. I'd picture a dark storage room in a damp valley, the air smelling like soil and old wood. I picture the wrapped frame pieces placed in a corner like something waiting, and I imagine it, even now, vibrating quietly in the dark. Not loudly, not enough for anyone to complain, just enough to be felt by anyone sleeping on it, just enough to get inside the body, just enough to make a person adapt night after night, until they can't remember what quiet used to feel like, waiting for its next owner. Story 2. To make sense of what happened, you need a picture of my neighborhood. My street branches off from a main town road, the kind with steady traffic during the day and the occasional late-night car that sounds too loud when everything else is quiet. My house sits on the right side, about halfway down. If you follow the street all the way to the end, it stops at a T-intersection. To the left is a small cul-de-sac with a few homes tucked into it like an afterthought. To the right, the road dips down and the tree line begins. Past that point, it's mostly woods, thick and dark, the kind that swallow sound and make you feel like you're being watched even when you know you're probably not. Some mornings, if I'm up early enough, I see a couple of neighbors out walking their dogs or trying to get some steps in before work. They nod, they wave. They do that polite early morning thing people do when they don't want to talk, but they also don't want to seem unfriendly. I'm not really part of that little routine. I jog, but I keep to myself. I also don't like dogs. I know that's not a popular thing to say. People hear it and immediately think you must be some kind of monster, or that you had a bad experience when you were a kid. I didn't. I just don't like how unpredictable they feel to me. How a dog can be perfectly calm 1 second, and then suddenly throw itself at the end of a leash, barking like it's decided you're the enemy. It doesn't matter that the owner is smiling and saying he's friendly. My body still reacts like it's a threat. And I'm not a small guy either, which makes it even more ridiculous. I'm built big, I work out, but an angry dog can still make me tense in a way I don't like. Cats, on the other hand, don't bother me. The neighborhood is full of them. They slide along fences and down gutters like they own the place. People say they're good to have around because they keep the snakes away, especially the venomous ones that sometimes show up in the warmer months. I don't know how true that is, but I'd rather see a cat staring at me from a driveway than a dog pulling against a leash with foam at the corners of its mouth. There's one neighbor I see more often than anyone else, mostly because her schedule lines up with mine. She lives across the street from me, and she runs like she's training for something serious. It's hard not to notice her. Whenever I'm out at dawn, there's a good chance she's already been out for a while. I usually spot her coming from the direction of the T intersection at the end of the street. She always appears out of the darker part of the road and moves uphill toward the main road as if gravity doesn't apply to her. She wears one of those LED visibility bracelets that blink, probably so cars can see her. The light on it is bright green, the steady flash that marks her movement more than anything else. The rest of her is harder to make out in the early dark, but the bracelet is unmistakable. I haven't learned her name yet. We've spoken just enough times to be on friendly terms without crossing into real conversation. If we pass each other on opposite sides of the street, she gives me the same quiet greeting every time, like it's part of her routine as much as the run itself. "Good morning," soft voice, no effort wasted. I always answer back, nothing more than that. She keeps going, and I keep going. I also see her walking in the evening sometimes, the same steady discipline, like her day isn't complete until she's done both. I've caught myself thinking, more than once, that I wish I had that kind of commitment. I can barely talk myself into jogging a few days in a row. Yesterday, I decided to try waking up earlier. I had been feeling rushed at work, and I thought if I got my run done sooner, maybe the whole day would feel less tight. That was the idea, anyway. The alarm went off, and I actually got up instead of negotiating with myself for another 10 minutes. I changed, did a little warm-up, the bare minimum to keep my knees from complaining, and then I stepped outside. The street was dark and still. Not a single car, no porch lights, no voices. The air had that damp heaviness that settles in before sunrise, the kind that clings to your skin and makes everything smell like wet leaves and dirt. The moment I walked out, my glasses fogged up. For a few seconds, I could only see blurry shapes in the glow of a street lamp down the road. I stood there blinking until the lenses cleared. When they did, I noticed the street lamp's light didn't just light the ground. It seemed to fall in pale, translucent cones, like the air itself was thick enough to hold it. The yards along our street have big old live oaks, the kind with huge branches that stretch over the road. Moss hangs from them in long strands, and in the dim light, it looked like hair. The trees made the whole street feel older than it really is, like the neighborhood was built around them, and they'd been watching ever since. I started jogging with a flashlight in one hand. It wasn't a big one, just enough to catch cracks in the sidewalk and keep me from stepping into a pothole. I did a loop near the main road first, sticking to the brighter end of the street, letting my body wake up. My breath turned steady, my joints loosened, and after a few minutes I headed back the way I came, past my house, continuing down toward the far end of the street. By then, I was sweating. The humidity grabbed onto it and didn't let go. I slowed a little as the road slanted downhill into the older part of the neighborhood. The houses down there are different from the newer ones near the main road. They sit a little farther back, and many of them have wraparound porches with railings that look like they've been repainted a dozen times. The street feels narrower there, not because it actually is, but because the trees and the shadows press in. The closer you get to the dead end near the woods, the darker it becomes. There are streetlights, but they're spaced out and the tree cover blocks a lot of what they give. When the wind is still, the whole place feels like it's holding its breath. That was where I saw it. At first, it was nothing more than a flicker at the edge of my flashlight's beam. I was swinging the light casually as I ran, and the beam skimmed across the woods that line the right side near the end of the street. Something reflected back at me. For a second, I thought it was just the eyes of a raccoon or a stray cat. There are plenty of those, and at night you catch that quick shine all the time. I told myself it was nothing and kept going. Then it happened again. The flashlight bounced with my stride, and 2 points of reflection appeared, closer than before. Not just there, not just watching, but nearer in a way that didn't match my pace. The air around my ears went tight, like my body noticed before my mind did. I slowed without meaning to. The eyes showed again, and this time there was no question. Whatever it was coming toward the edge of the trees. I stopped jogging. My feet hit the pavement, and I stood there trying to make sense of the shapes beyond the beam. The woods were dense, branches weaving together, but the line where the trees met the grass was clear enough. The eyes hovered at that line for a heartbeat. Then it stepped out. I knew about coyotes. Everyone around here knows about them. People claim they see them at night sometimes, digging through trash cans, moving in quick shadows. But this wasn't a coyote. It was too big, too tall, too lean in the wrong way. It stood partly in the grass, partly in the thin strip of dirt where the trees ended. The body was long and rough, like the fur wasn't lying flat. It looked underfed, but not weak. Its head was low, shoulders high, as if it was built for stalking. It made a sound that wasn't a bark, wasn't a yip, and wasn't the kind of growl you hear from an angry dog behind a fence. This was deeper, steadier, like something warning you that you were already too close. Its ears were pinned back against its head. It didn't look curious. It looked focused. For a moment I froze, because that's what your body does when it can't decide whether to fight or run. My flashlight beam shook slightly as I tried to keep it on the animal's face. The eye shine was intense. It didn't blink the way I expected. It just watched me, and that stillness made it worse. Then it shifted its weight. One step forward, and something inside me snapped into motion. I turned around so fast I almost slipped. My shoes scraped on the pavement as I pushed off, and I started sprinting up the hill toward my house. The incline that had felt mild on the way down suddenly felt like a wall. My lungs flared, not even warmed up for that kind of effort. My arms pumped hard, flashlight clenched tight, the beam bouncing uselessly across the road and the yards. I didn't look back right away. The part of me that wanted to know what it was battled with the part that didn't want to see it any closer. But I could hear my own breathing too loud, and in that sound I tried to catch anything else. Footsteps, nails on pavement, leaves crunching. Anything that meant it had decided to follow. My mind started throwing out numbers and shapes that didn't make sense. 5 feet tall, I thought, and the thought terrified me because it wasn't based on careful measurement. It was based on the way the animal had felt in the dark, the way it filled the space. If it had come at me, I knew I wouldn't stand a chance. A dog bite is one thing. This was something else. I finally glanced back, just for a split second, and the street behind me was a tunnel of shadows. My flashlight beam was pointed too far ahead to help. I couldn't see the tree line clearly anymore. All I could see was the dim shape of the road and the black canopy of branches overhead. That was when the street lights shut off. Our neighborhood lights are on a timer. I'd forgotten that. There's a point just before sunrise where they go dark, like someone flips a switch for the whole street at once. I'd never noticed how sudden it was because I'm usually not down there at that exact time. But yesterday, running uphill with my heart hammering and my nerves lit up, the lights clicking off felt like the neighborhood abandoning me. 1 second there was dim yellow light ahead. The next second it was gone, and I was swallowed by darkness except for the small, shaky circle of my flashlight. I pushed harder. My throat burned. The sweat on my skin felt cold now, not from temperature, but from fear. The quiet around me felt unnatural, like the air had gone flat. I reached my driveway almost without recognizing it. My house appeared in the beam of the flashlight like a safe object in a nightmare, familiar but unreal. I ran up to the front door, fumbled the key, and got inside fast enough that my shoulder hit the frame. The glass storm door slammed behind me with a sharp crack that echoed in the empty morning. I locked it. Then I locked the main door, hands shaking enough that it took 2 tries. I stood in the entryway for a second, listening. Nothing. No scratching, no heavy breathing, no thud of something hitting the porch. I forced myself to move to the window by the door where I could see the street without opening anything. I pulled the curtain back just enough to look out. The road was empty. My flashlight beam was still cutting through the glass, making a faint reflection of my own face. Outside, the dark was thinning. The sky had that early pre-sunrise gray, the kind that makes everything look washed out. I watched the end of the street for movement, expecting to see the animal appear, expecting to see it standing in the road like it owned the place. I didn't see anything. My breathing slowed, but my heart kept pounding like it didn't believe I was safe yet. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it too fast. My hands were still unsteady. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself I had overreacted. Maybe it was a big dog that got loose. Maybe it was a coyote and the light made it look bigger. Maybe my brain had filled in details because it was dark and I was alone and I'd spooked myself. I carried the glass back toward the front of the house and glanced out the window again. That was when I saw her. My neighbor from across the street was sprinting up the road toward her house, coming from the direction of the T intersection like she always did. Even in the dim light, I recognized the green LED bracelet, blinking at a steady rhythm. What hit me first wasn't relief, exactly, but a strange sense of normalcy. Like seeing her meant the morning was back to being a normal morning, but then something about it didn't fit. She moved the same way she always did, light, fast, almost silent. She didn't look left or right. She didn't slow down. She ran straight to her driveway and up to her front door. A second later, she was inside. I stood there with my water glass in my hand, staring out the window, and the chill that ran through me had nothing to do with the damp morning, because she hadn't been out there a moment ago. I hadn't been away from the window for long, a minute or two at most, just enough time to drink water and walk back. In that time, there was no way she could have started a run from the far end of the street, made it all the way up, and reached her house. Not at any pace a normal person could keep, not without me seeing her earlier on the road. And it wasn't just that she appeared quickly. It was the feeling that she appeared out of nowhere, like she'd been dropped into the scene at the exact moment I looked away. I tried to reconstruct the timeline in my head. I ran from the woods. I got inside. I locked the doors. I watched the street. I went for water. I looked back. If she had been running the whole time, I would have seen her. The road is straight. There's nowhere to hide. The only way she could have shown up like that was if she had been standing somewhere out of sight, waiting, or if she had come from somewhere else entirely. I leaned closer to the glass and looked toward the end of the street again, toward the darker part near the trees. My eyes searched the empty pavement, the yards, the shadowed gaps between houses. For the first time since I moved here, the familiar layout of the neighborhood didn't comfort me. It felt like a map I could no longer trust. I kept thinking about the animal stepping out of the woods, ears pinned back, growl low, eyes fixed on me like it knew exactly what I was. I kept thinking about the streetlights cutting off all at once, as if something had timed it perfectly. And then I kept thinking about my neighbor, the way she ran, the way she always came from that same direction, and how I had never once questioned it until now. The sun was just beginning to rise, turning the sky a pale color, and I was standing in my own front room with my doors locked, feeling like I'd missed something important by only a few seconds. Across the street, her house looked, curtains drawn, no movement visible, no sound, just another home in another quiet neighborhood. but my skin wouldn't stop prickling, and the cold certainty in my stomach wouldn't go away. She hadn't been out there a moment ago, and there was no way she could have finished her run in the half-minute I'd stopped watching the street. Story 3. My family moved a lot when I was a kid. By the time I was 10, I had already lived in 3 different houses. Then we moved one more time when I was in high school. I can picture the later places without trying. I can walk through them in my head like I'm there again. But the first house is different. I lived there from about 4 years old to 8, and I remember almost nothing about it. That should feel normal, I guess. People forget early years all the time. Still, it bothers me in a way I can't explain. It isn't just that the memories are fuzzy. It's more like there's a blank space where something should be, and every time I look at that blank space, I get the feeling that it was put there on purpose. I'm in my 20s now. Last year, I started therapy for anxiety and some long-running issues I couldn't put a name to. I was expecting breathing exercises, journaling, maybe medication discussions. Some of that happened, but my therapist also suggested something she called memory mapping. She told me to draw the places I lived as a kid, like rough floor plans, and to include as much detail as I could remember. She said the act of drawing forces your brain to slow down and fill in gaps. Sometimes memories come back because you stop trying to think them and you start rebuilding them. It sounded harmless, a little weird, but harmless. I went home, cleared off my kitchen table, and found a notebook and a pencil. I decided to start with the first house, the one that bothered me most. I told myself I'd do my best and accept whatever I couldn't remember. It was just a sketch. It wasn't going to hurt me. At first, it came easily. I drew the front door, then the short hallway that led into the living room. I drew the kitchen off to one side, and the stairs. Upstairs, I put my bedroom at the top of the stairs and my parents' room across the hall. At the end of the hall, there was a bathroom. That was basically it. A small house in a working-class neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing worth remembering, which was part of the reason I always scolded myself for being so bothered by forgetting it. When I finished that first rough sketch, I leaned back and stared at it. The feeling came almost right away, an unpleasant pressure behind my eyes, like a headache that hadn't decided to fully show up yet. The drawing looked wrong, but I couldn't point to what was wrong about it. It reminded me of reading a word too many times until it stops looking like a real word. The shapes are right, but the meaning slips. You start wondering if you've ever truly known it. That's how my sketch felt. The lines were plain, the layout made sense, and still something about it was off. I couldn't shake it, so I did what I always do when I don't trust my own memory. I asked my mom. I sent her a message and asked if that first house had a garage. She answered pretty quickly. Yes, she said. A single-car garage on the right side. As soon as I read that, I felt a small rush of relief, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. I went back to the sketch and added the garage on the right side. When I finished, I stared again. It looked better. Not perfect, but better in the way that a crooked picture feels better after you straighten it. I could tell myself I'd simply forgotten the garage, and now I'd corrected it. That explanation calmed me down enough to put the notebook away and go to bed. The next morning, I took the notebook out with my coffee and looked at the drawing again. My relief didn't last. Something else immediately bothered me. The garage wasn't big enough. I know how ridiculous that sounds. I hadn't been trying to draw it to scale. I hadn't measured anything. It was a simple sketch, but the garage on the page felt too small in a way that made my skin tighten. I kept staring at it, waiting for logic to win and tell my brain to shut up. It didn't. I erased the garage and drew it larger. Not huge, just bigger. Wide enough that a car could actually fit and you could still open the doors. When I did that, the sick feeling eased again, like I'd scratched an itch I couldn't reach before. Then the kitchen started to look wrong. I stared at the kitchen shape I'd drawn, and I couldn't explain it, but it felt like it didn't belong there. The position made sense, but it felt like I'd put it in the correct place for the wrong house. I erased it and drew it again. Still wrong. I drew it a third time, moving it slightly, adjusting the doorways. I erased and redrew the counters. I added a pantry because I suddenly felt certain we'd had one, not maybe certain. I could almost smell dry cereal in paper bags. For the upstairs bathroom, I added a linen closet because I remembered towels stacked inside it, and the way the door would stick if you didn't pull hard enough. As I made these changes, I started changing other things too. I extended the upstairs hallway, giving it more length, because the one I'd drawn felt too short. I widened the stairs. I adjusted my bedroom door so it opened the right way. Each change made the drawing look more believable, and each change also made me feel a little worse, like I was walking towards something I couldn't see yet. I called my mom to check a few details, hoping she'd correct me and I could stop obsessing. I asked about the pantry. Yes, she said, we had one. I asked about the linen closet. Yes. My confidence rose a little. Maybe my memory wasn't broken. Maybe this exercise was working. Then I asked about the hallway upstairs and told her I thought it had been longer than I first remembered. My mom laughed a little, not unkindly, like she thought I was being overly careful. She said it wasn't a big house. The hallway couldn't have been that long. Her answer should have settled it. It should have let me erase the extra length and move on. Instead, it bothered me more, because when I looked at my drawing, the hallway felt correct. It felt like if I shortened it, the whole thing would tilt out of balance again. So I kept working. At some point, the sketch stopped being casual. I got a ruler. I started measuring each room in relation to the others. I set a rough scale. I added door swings, closet depths, widths of stairs. I did math like I was building the place from scratch. It wasn't even about memory anymore. It became about making the drawing feel right. I added up the square footage as best as I could, just to see if it made sense. I figured maybe that would snap me out of it. A small house is a small house. The numbers should be simple. They weren't. The inside of the house, on paper, was bigger than the outside. I checked my work. I recalculated. I measured again and again. I told myself I was being sloppy. But no matter what I did, the math didn't come together. It was like I had drawn a space that didn't exist. The more I tried to correct it, the more the interior space seemed to demand more room, like it was pushing outward, like the drawing wanted to become something larger than the house had ever been. I remember staring at the page and thinking, very calmly, I must be making some mistake. There was no other explanation. Houses don't have extra space hidden inside them like a magic trick. This was memory, not architecture. But I also couldn't stop looking at the area between the kitchen and the garage, because in my version of the house, there was something there, a room. It wasn't large, and I hadn't even drawn it clearly the first time. It was more like an outline that kept showing up no matter how I tried to erase it. A space between the kitchen and the garage that felt necessary, like if it wasn't there, the kitchen door had nowhere to go. My mom had never mentioned it. When she walked me through the layout in earlier conversations, she never described a room there. She described the kitchen and the garage as separate things, with the outside door and the inside door, normal as could be. Still, the room remained in my head, like a stubborn word on the tip of my tongue. That afternoon, I called her again. I told her I wanted to write down the layout properly, room by room, just to help with therapy. I asked her to talk me through it slowly, starting at the front door. She did. Front door, hallway, living room, kitchen, stairs, upstairs, bedrooms, bathroom, closet. Everything she described matched a normal, small house. She sounded patient, a little amused the way a parent sounds when their adult child suddenly cares about something they never cared about before. When she finished, I looked down at my notes and then at my drawing. Her version was clean. Mine wasn't. In my version, there was a door on the ground floor between the kitchen and the garage. Not a door to the outside, not a door into the garage. A different door, one that shouldn't be there if the house was as small as she said. I asked her directly if there had been a room between the kitchen and the garage, like a mudroom or a utility room, or maybe a storage space. There was a pause, the kind where you can hear someone thinking about how to answer. Then she said no. There was no need for a room to be there. That phrasing stuck with me. Not no, there wasn't, not I don't remember. She said there was no need for one, like she was explaining why a room didn't belong in the design. It felt like she was talking around something, even if she didn't realize it. After I hung up, I sat at the table for a long time with the drawing in front of me. I tried to be reasonable. I tried to accept that my brain had created a false space. People do that, don't they? Memories mix. Houses blend together. A pantry from one place, a closet from another. But the feeling wouldn't go away. I decided I didn't want to think about that room anymore. I wanted to remember it, if it was real. I wanted something solid. A smell, a sound, a texture. Anything that didn't feel like guessing. So I stared at the blank area where I'd drawn the room, and I let myself sit with it the way my therapist had taught me to do with uncomfortable feelings. I didn't fight it. I didn't distract myself. I just stayed there, letting the discomfort build until it either broke or turned into something clearer. It did turn into something. I remembered a door. Not a normal interior door, light and hollow. This one had weight. In my memory, the door wasn't painted white like the others. It was darker, maybe brown, maybe gray. The color hard to pin down because the memory felt like it existed in poor lighting. I remembered the handle being cold. I remembered that when the door was shut, it looked too tight in its frame, like it didn't quite belong, like it had been forced into place. Most of all, I remembered not liking to be near it. That was the sharpest part of the memory. The child version of me avoiding that hallway corner, taking a wider path through the kitchen, glancing at the door and then looking away. It wasn't fear like a jump scare. It was more like the instinct you have around a growling dog. The sense that you should not get close, not because something is definitely going to happen, but because you don't want to find out. Once that memory surfaced, I couldn't put it back. The next morning, I called my mom again. I told myself I was just going to ask one last question. I'd clear it up, laugh at myself, and move on. She answered, and I asked her if she was completely sure there was no room between the kitchen and the garage. She sounded tired, like she knew where this was going. She said, again, there was no room there. I told her I understood. I said I wasn't talking about a room. I asked her about the door. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing. I could picture her face going still, the way it used to when she was deciding whether I was old enough to hear the truth about something. Then she asked me what kind of door I meant. I told her I didn't know how to describe it. Just a door near the garage. Heavy. Wrong somehow. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. Careful. She said my father covered one up before we moved in. For a second, I actually laughed, because it sounded like a joke, like the start of an old family story she'd never told me. I asked her what she meant, exactly, and she said there had been a door there when they first saw the house. She didn't know what it led to. She said my dad had it drywalled over before we moved our things in. Covered it completely so it just became part of the wall. I waited for her to add more, to tell me what had been behind it. She didn't. I asked her what was behind the door. She said she never knew. I asked how she could not know. If there had been a door in the house, How could she live there and not know where it went? She told me my dad never told her, and she never asked. I asked her why she never asked. She sighed, and when she spoke again, it sounded like she was choosing each word as if it might cut her if she picked the wrong one. She said my father was strange about that house. She said there were some things you didn't ask about. That was the end of the conversation in a way that didn't feel like an ending. We said goodbye, but I could tell she wanted off the phone, and I didn't push her. After I hung up, I sat in silence and stared at the wall of my apartment like it might open up if I looked hard enough. My dad died 6 years ago, heart attack. It was sudden, but not suspicious. No secrets revealed after, no dramatic confessions. He was just gone, leaving behind normal grief and normal paperwork, and a few boxes of tools that nobody really wanted. Now, with that single sentence from my mom, it felt like a new shadow had been placed over my memory of him. Not that he had been dangerous exactly, but that he had known something about that first house and had decided, for reasons he never shared, that nobody else should go looking. I kept the drawing. For days I told myself I would stop. I would take it to therapy, talk through it, and let it be what it was. A strange mental exercise that stirred up the kind of half-dream feelings that come with childhood. But at night, when everything was quiet, I would find myself thinking about that door, about my child self avoiding it, about my father seeing it and deciding to erase it instead of opening it, instead of letting it stay part of the house. Eventually, I took the notebook out again. I truly did. I stared at the area between the kitchen and the garage, at the blank stretch of wall I'd drawn there, and I told myself it was enough to know the door had existed. The details didn't matter. My hand moved anyway. I drew another door. It wasn't the same as the first one. This one was in a different spot, and as soon as I drew it, I felt the same sick relief, the same sense of balance returning. Like the page had been waiting for it, like the house, on paper, could finally breathe. I don't know where that door leads. I don't even know if it's real. I can't tell the difference anymore between remembering and inventing. The more I work on the drawing, the more it feels like the drawing is working on me. And the strangest part is the math. The square footage keeps growing. No matter how carefully I measure the rooms, no matter how I adjust the scale, the interior space refuses to fit inside the exterior shape. It is as if every new detail I remember expands the house to make room for it. It doesn't behave like a memory should. It behaves like a place that is still there, somewhere, unfolding as I look at it. I've started leaving the notebook closed most days. I keep it tucked away, but I know exactly where it is. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about the next thing to add, and the thought feels less like an idea and more like an instruction. I'm afraid that if I keep drawing, I won't just remember the house. I'll remember what was inside it. Story 4. I haven't left my house in years. I stopped counting a long time ago, partly because I didn't want to know the number, and partly because days don't feel like days anymore when you never go anywhere. Time turns soft and shapeless, like it's melting in your hands. Morning and night are only things I guess at by the way my eyes feel, or by how tired I am, or by the quiet shifts in the house when everything seems to settle. At the beginning, it wasn't like this. At the beginning, staying inside felt temporary. I told myself I was just taking a break. I told myself I'd go back out when I felt ready. I kept thinking, one more week, one more month, just until I feel normal again. But normal again never showed up, and weeks became months, and months became years, and then one day it hit me that I was living my life as if the outside world had become a story I used to read a long time ago. After the first few months, it stopped bothering me as much. That sounds strange to say, but it's true. The mind adjusts to whatever it has to. I didn't feel the need to be outside anymore. I didn't miss the sun the way I thought I would. I didn't miss driving or walking or even the sound of people. I would sometimes think about it, sure, but it felt distant, like remembering a place you lived as a kid. Inside my house, everything I needed was here. I was fed, I was comfortable, I had entertainment. I felt safe. And that combination, fed, comfortable, entertained, safe, felt like something I could never guarantee if I stepped outside. Outside had always been unpredictable. Outside had bills and problems and eyes. Inside had walls and locks and quiet. Inside had control. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me sound lazy or broken or like I gave up. Maybe I did. But when you live in a place long enough, the place starts living in you, too. The house becomes part of your thinking. The rooms become your whole map of reality. The furniture becomes landmarks. The air becomes familiar, like a smell you stop noticing until it changes. And lately, something has changed. It started as a small feeling I couldn't explain. I would walk past the front door and feel a tightness in my chest. Not the usual, what if I go out and panic kind of fear. This was different. It felt like pressure, like the air was heavier near the door. The same thing happened near the windows. If I stood too close, it felt like my skin wanted to pull back from the glass. It wasn't pain, exactly. It was the kind of wrong feeling you get when you almost trip on stairs. That sudden flash of danger. Except it didn't go away. The best way I can describe it is like being watched. You know that feeling when you can tell someone is staring at you so hard you can almost feel it on the back of your neck? Like their attention has weight. Like your clothes aren't really hiding you and your private thoughts are somehow visible. It was like that, except the closer I got to anything that led outside, the stronger it became. At first, I thought it was just me. I blamed my own brain. I hadn't been outside in so long. Of course, I'd feel weird near a door. Of course, I'd feel anxious about windows. Maybe my mind was overreacting. Maybe I was getting paranoid. I told myself it was the natural result of living shut in for years. People get strange when they isolate. That's what I'd always heard. And now it was probably happening to me. But there was something else, something small at first, then impossible to ignore. I don't think there's sunlight coming through my windows anymore. That sentence sounds ridiculous as I type it, because I know how the world works. The sun rises, it shines. Light passes through glass. Even if you cover a window, some light finds a way around the edges. That's basic. It's normal. But I had taped my windows a long time ago. Not because of any big event. Not because I was hiding from anyone. I did it because I didn't like the feeling of being exposed. I didn't like the idea that someone could walk past and see me. Even if the chances were low, the idea sat in my mind like a splinter. So I covered the glass. At first it was just a few strips, then more, then eventually it was fully covered. Over time, I stopped remembering what it looked like without the tape. Still, tape is tape. It isn't a brick wall. Light should still leak through somewhere, even if it's dim, even if it's only a thin line along an edge. But the rooms weren't just dim. They felt sealed, like the house had been wrapped up in layers and layers until the outside couldn't touch it anymore. I would sit in the living room and realize I couldn't tell what time it was at all. No hints, no soft shift of daylight, no evening glow. Just the same flat, dead lighting unless I turned on a lamp. And even the lamps started to feel strange, like their light didn't reach as far as it used to. I tried not to think about it too much. I told myself the tape was thicker than I remembered. Maybe I had added more layers. Maybe I had covered the cracks better. Maybe my eyes had adjusted to darkness and now everything felt different. Then there was the food. People always ask that question when they hear someone lives like I do. Not in person. I don't have visitors, but I've read the question before. In comments and threads and those little discussions people have online about isolation and survival. The first thing they ask is, how do you eat? How do you get groceries? The honest answer is, I don't know. I remember ordering food in the beginning. I remember delivery drivers leaving bags at my doorstep. I remember checking my phone and seeing order confirmations. I remember having money somehow and not worrying about it the way I probably should have. It felt like I had enough, like it would keep working, like I could exist quietly without the outside demanding anything from me. At some point, my orders stopped going through. I remember that clearly because it annoyed me. I tried different apps. I tried different websites. I tried to fix my internet thinking it was a connection problem. Sometimes the pages wouldn't load right. Sometimes they would load, but the checkout wouldn't work. Sometimes the screen would just freeze, like the whole system didn't want to talk to me. But even after my orders stopped working, food still showed up inside my house, not at the door. Inside. I want you to understand what I mean. I'm not talking about finding a delivery I forgot to bring in or discovering a bag on the porch that I somehow missed. I'm talking about walking into the kitchen and seeing groceries on the counter that weren't there before. Cans, bread, packs of meat, sometimes fresh fruit, sometimes things I hadn't eaten in years, sometimes brand new items like they'd just been bought that day. At first, I didn't panic. I should have, right? If you were living alone and food appeared in your kitchen without you bringing it in, most people would call the police. Most people would assume someone broke in. Most people would be terrified. But I wasn't most people, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I was isolated. I was tired, and I was hungry enough at the time that fear didn't come first. My first thought was relief. My second thought was honestly excitement. Free food. No need to go out, no need to talk to anyone, no need to face the door. It felt like the house was taking care of me, like some unseen system had decided I could stay inside as long as I wanted. I know how wrong that sounds. I know it. But when something makes your life easier, you don't question it as hard as you should, especially when questioning it might mean losing it. For a while, it was almost comforting. I fell into a routine. Food would appear and I would eat. The house stayed quiet and I stayed inside. I stopped trying to order things online because what was the point? The groceries came anyway. It was like I had slipped out of normal life and into some private loop where everything was provided. And then that weirdness around the windows and doors started. At first, it was only in certain moments. I'd walk past a window and feel that pressure, that attention, and I'd keep moving. I'd tell myself I imagined it. I'd distract myself with a video or a game or anything that didn't require me to think. But it grew stronger. Not louder, not more obvious. Just heavier. Like the house was trying to warn me. Or like something outside was leaning closer, learning the shape of my rooms through the walls. Around the same time, the food started showing up less often. It wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like a faucet being turned slowly. First, I noticed longer gaps between groceries. Then I noticed smaller amounts. Then I noticed that when the food did appear, it didn't feel the same. I don't mean the taste. Not exactly. The taste was mostly fine. The consistency was fine. The packaging looked normal. But when I reached for it, something in me reacted like I was touching something dirty. It was a deep, instinctive disgust, the kind you feel when you accidentally touch something rotten and your whole body jerks away before your mind even catches up. And there was this other sensation, hard to describe, a prickling in the back of my head, like static, like my thoughts were brushing against something dangerous. The closest thing I can compare it to is when you stand too close to something that gives off heat, not enough to burn you, but enough to make your skin feel threatened. Except it wasn't heat. It was a sick, buzzing warning, like my body was telling me, this is not safe. This is not food, not really. Still, I ate. I always ate. Because hunger doesn't care about your fear. Hunger turns the world into one simple goal. And after a while, I was always hungry. I started noticing my body in ways I had avoided for a long time. When you're isolated, you can pretend you're fine because no one sees you. There's no mirror you have to face unless you choose to. There's no reason to look at yourself closely. But when the hunger became constant, I couldn't ignore it. My hands looked thinner. My wrists looked too small. When I touched my ribs, I could count them without trying. My cheeks felt hollow, and when I ran my fingers along my face, the bone seemed too close to the surface, like my skin was just a thin cover. I caught my reflection one day, accidentally in a dark TV screen when it was off, and it shocked me. I looked like someone sick. Not just tired, not just pale, I looked like a person being slowly erased. My eyes seemed too big for my face. My mouth looked dry, my skin looked stretched. And the worst part was that I didn't even feel surprised. It was like some part of me had already known, and only now the rest of me was forced to admit it. 3 days ago, food appeared for the last time. It wasn't much. A few items on the counter, like an afterthought. I ate it fast. Faster than I should have, because I couldn't stand the anxiety of having it near me. I didn't enjoy it. I barely tasted it. I just swallowed and waited for my stomach to stop hurting. Then nothing. At first I told myself, okay, it's late. It will show up tomorrow. It always shows up eventually. I tried to sleep, but sleep didn't work right anymore. I drifted in and out, waking up sweaty, waking up with my heart racing, waking up convinced I heard something near the door. The next day, still nothing. I checked every room, not because I thought I'd missed it, but because my mind needed to be sure. I opened cabinets like I expected to find something hidden there. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the empty counter, waiting for the groceries to appear the way they always did, as if staring hard enough could make it happen. By the third day, hunger stopped being a dull ache and became something sharp. It snapped me awake like a slap. My hands shook. My thoughts felt slow and foggy, like they had to push through mud to form a sentence. I started getting dizzy when I stood up too fast. My stomach cramped not just from emptiness, but from something deeper, like my body was angry at me for letting this happen. I tried to look up what was going on outside. I know that sounds late. It was late, but part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was afraid that if I searched and found an answer, the answer would force me to do something I didn't want to do, like leave. Still, I tried. I searched local news. I searched for anything that could explain why deliveries stopped, why food was appearing, why the house felt sealed, why the windows had gone dark. Nothing. No emergency. No disaster, no war, no blackout, no strange event. It was like the world was normal. People were living their lives, people were going to work, people were buying groceries, people were walking outside under the sun. And that made less sense than any disaster would have. If the world had ended, at least my situation would fit. If there had been some kind of quarantine or invasion or collapse, then yes, okay, maybe I wasn't the only one trapped. Maybe everyone was hiding. Maybe the outside really was dangerous. But the internet, what I could still access, didn't show that. It showed normal life continuing without me. So why did my house feel like a sealed box? Why did the windows look like they swallowed light? Why did I feel watched whenever I got near anything that led out? The dread got worse each day, as if whatever I was sensing had noticed that I had noticed it. The pressure near the door was so strong now that sometimes I couldn't even walk past the hallway without feeling sick. My skin would tighten. My stomach would drop. My thoughts would race with images I couldn't fully see. And then I started seeing things. Not clear things. Not something I could point to and say, that's a person, that's an animal, that's real. It was always out of the corner of my eye. A shadow that didn't match the shape of anything in my house. A figure that seemed too tall, too thin, too still. A sense of movement where nothing should be moving. Every time I turned my head to look directly, There was nothing there. Just the same walls, the same furniture, the same stale air. I told myself it was hunger. I told myself it was my brain misfiring from lack of food and lack of sunlight. People hallucinate when they starve. People see things when they're sleep deprived. It was logical. It was explainable. Except it didn't feel like hallucinations. It felt like something was practicing being seen, like it was testing how much it could show itself before I broke. This morning, I decided I couldn't keep living like this, if you can call it living. I walked to the nearest window. My hands shook as I reached for the tape. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, breathing through my mouth, trying to convince myself I was being dramatic. Tape on a window, that's all it was. I could peel it off and let the sunlight in and laugh at myself. That's what I wanted. That's what I needed. I started peeling. The tape came away with that dry ripping sound, layer after layer. It took longer than I expected. I'd used more than I remembered. Under the tape, the surface felt wrong beneath my fingers. Not smooth like glass should feel. Too solid, too cold in the wrong way. When I finally pulled away enough to see what was behind it, my mind stalled, like it couldn't process what my eyes were showing me. There was no window. There was a wall, not a boarded-up window, not a covered window, not a window painted over. A wall, solid, plain, unbroken wall where a window should have been. I didn't understand it. I still don't. I touched it again and again, pressing my palm flat to it, searching for the outline of a frame, searching for any edge, any crack, any sign that it was glass under there, and I was just confused. But it was wall, the same as any other wall in the house. My throat went dry. My skin went cold. I moved to another window, tearing at the tape harder this time, not caring how loud it was. Same thing. Wall. Wall. Every window I uncovered was the same. No sunlight, no outside, just wall after wall after wall, like the house had decided it didn't need openings anymore. I sat on the floor for a long time after that. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat and listened to my own breathing, and I realized something that made my stomach twist harder than hunger ever had. The house wasn't just keeping me in. It had removed the idea of outside entirely. I don't think there's any point in trying to reason through it here. I don't think I have time to run experiments. I don't think I have time to tear apart the walls and search for answers. I don't have the strength for that, not like this. My hands already feel weak. My legs feel unsteady. My thoughts keep slipping away from me mid-sentence. But I do know one thing. The front door is still a door. I've touched it many times since this started. I've felt the seams. I've felt the handle. I've pressed my forehead against it when the dread was so strong I thought I would pass out. And it still felt like a door. Solid, yes, but not like the walls. Different. Like the one remaining part of the house that still admits there is an out. That's the only path left. So I'm going to open it today. I'm writing this because I don't know what happens when I do. Hunger might take me first if I keep waiting. If I stay here, I might just fade away in this sealed box until there's nothing left of me. But opening the door feels like stepping up to the edge of something I can't see. Something that has been staring in at me for years, patient and quiet. Maybe the outside is normal and I've lost my mind. Maybe I'll open the door and see sunlight in a street, and I'll fall to my knees and laugh and cry at the same time, because I was trapped by my own fear. Or maybe the outside has been waiting for me. Maybe it's the thing I've been feeling near every opening. Maybe it's the reason food appeared in my kitchen without explanation. Maybe it was feeding me the way you keep an animal alive until you decide what to do with it. I don't know. I only know that I can't stay in this house much longer, and I can't keep pretending that whatever is happening will fix itself. The house is too quiet now. The air feels too thick. The corners feel crowded even when they're empty. And every time I look toward the door, that pressure looks back like it knows I've finally made a choice. If I survive, I'll come back and tell you what I saw. If hunger takes me before I can turn the handle, then this is the last thing I'll ever write. And if the outside takes me first, at least there will be proof that I tried to leave. Goodbye. Story 5. I've lived in this house for 6 years, long enough that it feels like my body knows it better than my mind does. I know which floorboard near the bathroom complains if you step on it too hard. I know the exact spot in the hallway where the paint always looks a little darker, like it never fully dried. I know the closet door that swells in summer and sticks, no matter how many times I sand the edge. It's the kind of place where you can walk around at night without turning on a light and still avoid the sharp corners and low furniture, because the layout has become memory. That's why it hit me so fast this morning. Not slowly, not like a weird feeling you can ignore. I stepped out of my bedroom, still half asleep, holding my phone in one hand and my coffee in the other, and I saw it right away. There was a door where there has never been a door. It wasn't like someone had cut into the wall last night and installed something fresh from a hardware store. This door looked old, like it had been there longer than the house itself. The wood was dark and dull, the kind that soaks up light. The brass handle wasn't shiny. It was worn smooth in places, as if too many hands had turned it over too many years. The frame had small scratches around the bottom, thin lines like something heavy had been dragged against it again and again. I stood there staring at it while my brain tried to catch up. I told myself it was a dream because that's the easiest answer when your eyes show you something impossible. I even did the stupid thing people joke about. I pinched my arm hard enough to leave a mark. The sharp pain snapped through my skin and didn't fade the way dream pain fades. My coffee smelled real. The hallway was cold under my bare feet. I was awake. I don't know how long I stood there. Time gets strange when your mind doesn't know what to do. It could have been 2 minutes or 10. I remember my coffee cooling in my hand and the small sound of the refrigerator cycling on in the kitchen behind me. Like everything else in the world was completely normal, and I was the only one noticing the problem. Finally, I walked closer. The door didn't belong. My hallway wall has always been plain. There are no hidden spaces in this house. No extra room that you find on a blueprint years later. I know where every closet is. I know where the bathroom plumbing runs. I know because I've lived with it, paid for it, and fixed it. I even have an old scratch near the baseboard from moving in the couch, and the scratch should have been there right next to the new door if this was real. It wasn't, but it was there anyway. I put my fingers around the brass handle. It was cold in a way that felt wrong, like it had been sitting outside overnight. I turned it slowly. Locked. That should have been it. That should have been the moment I backed up, got my phone, called literally anyone, and waited outside until someone else could witness it with me. A neighbor, a friend, my landlord, the police if I wanted to sound insane. Anyone who could stand in that hallway and say, yes, that door is real, or no, you're having some kind of breakdown. Anything but me alone with it. Instead, I did what I'm now realizing is the exact thing a person does right before their life turns into a warning story. I went into my bathroom drawer and found a bobby pin. I don't even know why I had one. I don't use them. It must have been left behind by someone at some point. An old guest, an old version of my life. My hands were slightly sweaty when I brought it back. My heart was beating too fast, like my body already knew what my brain was trying to pretend it didn't. I knelt in the hallway like I'd seen in movies. The bobby pin bent into a rough shape, and I slipped it into the lock. It opened easier than it should have. That's not me trying to sound dramatic. It didn't fight me at all. It didn't stick. There was no stubborn click. I barely moved the pin, and the lock turned like it had been waiting for exactly this moment. Like it was never truly locked, just closed. The door swung inward. Cold air rolled out. It didn't smell like mold or dust. like a space that's been closed for years. It didn't smell like paint, like something newly built. It smelled clean and empty, like the inside of a drawer that has never held anything. And underneath that, faint but unmistakable, there was a smell that made my throat tighten. Old paper. I stepped inside. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. No windows, no vents that I could see. The floor was bare. The walls were close enough that it felt like stepping into a box. Above me, a single light bulb hung from a cord. It wasn't on at first. Then, as my second foot crossed the threshold, the bulb flickered and turned on. Not smoothly. It stuttered, like it had to remember how to produce light. The dim glow threw harsh shadows against the walls, and the shadows made the room feel even smaller. I stood there, frozen, listening to the soft buzz of the bulb and the strange silence of everything else. At first, I thought the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper. From a distance, it looked like old paper stuck up in uneven sheets, edges curling, corners lifting. I took a step closer, my stomach tightening for no clear reason. They weren't sheets. They were photographs, hundreds of them. They were printed on thin paper and pinned up edge to edge, covering every inch of the walls so no paint showed through. There were no gaps, no blank spots, just photo after photo after photo, creating this overwhelming skin of images, like the room itself was made out of memories. I leaned in, trying to understand what I was looking at. My breath stopped. Every photograph was of me, not one or two, not a handful, all of them. I was in every image, at different ages and different places, wearing different clothes, in moments I hadn't thought about in years. Some were clear, like they were taken with a good camera. Some were grainy, like a zoomed-in shot from far away. Some looked like they were taken from a car window. Others looked like they were taken from behind a doorway, or from between shelves, or from the far end of a room. I saw myself at the grocery store, standing in the produce section, holding a bag of oranges. I saw myself jogging in the park, hair tied up, face red from effort, unaware. I saw myself sitting at my desk at work, eyes on my computer screen, a half-empty water bottle beside my hand. I saw myself on a first date from 3 years ago in a small restaurant, leaning forward and trying to smile like I wasn't nervous. And then I saw things that made my knees feel weak. I saw myself at my mother's funeral. I remember that day in painful detail. The heavy air, the flowers that smelled too sweet, the way I tried to hold my face still. In the photo, I was standing slightly apart from everyone else, hands clasped too tightly, my eyes looking past the camera as if I could see something no one else could. I saw myself crying in my car in a parking garage. That photo made my vision blur for a second, because it was a moment I've never shared with anyone. It was after a phone call I've tried to forget. I remember gripping the steering wheel until my fingers hurt. I remember the echo of my own breathing in the dark concrete space. In the photo, tears were on my cheeks, my mouth open like I was trying not to make a sound. My hands started to shake. I turned slowly, looking from wall to wall, and the room felt like it was closing in. The images weren't random, they were organized in a way my brain couldn't fully track, but I could feel the pattern. Days, years, private moments mixed with public ones, joyful moments next to painful ones. It wasn't just proof that someone had taken pictures of me. It was proof that someone had been with me through my whole life, watching when no one else was watching. The worst part was that in many of the photos, I could tell the angle was impossible, unless the photographer was close, too close. There were pictures taken inside my home, in my living room, when I thought I was alone. In my kitchen, late at night, wearing an oversized shirt, scrolling on my phone by the fridge light. In my hallway, walking past the exact spot where I now stood. I looked down, trying to steady myself, and that's when I noticed the center of the floor. There was a single Polaroid lying face down. It wasn't tossed there casually, it was placed perfectly in the middle, as if the whole room had been built around it, like it was the point of everything. My mouth went dry. For a second, I thought about leaving it. I thought about backing out, shutting the door, and pretending this never happened. But my hands moved anyway. I bent down and picked it up. The photo showed me in my bed, asleep, last night. I could tell immediately because I was wearing the same gray shirt I'd fallen asleep in. My hair was in the same messy shape I'd woken up with. The pillow had the same dent from where my head had been resting. The angle was from inside my bedroom, looking toward the bed, as if the photographer had been standing near the foot of it. In the bottom corner, there was a timestamp, 3:17 a.m. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like my body forgot how to breathe. The Polaroid was still slightly warm. That detail is what broke me. I don't know how to explain it without sounding crazy, but warmth has meaning. Warmth means recent. Warmth means someone had held it not long ago. Warmth means the air in this room wasn't trapped for years. It was active, used, lived in. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the photo. My mind tried to tell me 100 things at once. That it was a prank, that someone had broken in, that I was being watched, that I wasn't safe here, that I needed to call the police, that I needed to wake up. I turned and ran out of the room. I don't remember closing the door behind me. I don't even remember making it down the hallway without falling. My feet slapped the floor, my breath came in sharp, painful pulls, and I kept expecting to feel a hand grab my shoulder from behind. I made it to the front door and yanked it open so hard it hit the wall. Outside air hit my face, and I didn't stop until I reached my car. I'm sitting in it now, parked in the driveway, hands still shaking so badly that typing feels wrong, like my fingers don't belong to me. I locked the doors even though I know locks don't mean much if a door can appear out of a wall. I keep staring at the house, waiting for movement in the windows, waiting to see that dark wood door somehow show itself from the outside, like proof that any of this is real. I don't know who has been watching me. I don't know how that room appeared in my hallway. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. My phone is in my hand, and I've opened the dial pad 3 times, ready to call someone, anyone, but I can't decide who. What do you even say? Hello, my house grew a door and there's a room full of photos of me, including one taken in my bedroom at 3:17 this morning. How do you say that without sounding like you need help in a different way? The thing that keeps me from driving away isn't that I think I can fix this. It isn't courage. It's something worse. It's that I can't stop looking at the Polaroid, because in the corner of that photo in my bedroom, there was a shadow. It wasn't the shadow of a chair. It wasn't the shadow of a lamp. It wasn't the shape of anything I own. It was too tall and too narrow. It leaned in the wrong direction compared to the light in the room. It didn't blur the way a shadow should. It had edges that felt too definite, as if it wasn't just darkness, but something standing in darkness. And in the photo, it was standing very, very still. I keep zooming in on the picture even though it's a Polaroid and there isn't much detail to zoom into. I keep tilting it under different light, like that will change what I'm seeing. Every time I look, I feel the same cold pressure in my chest. Someone was in my room while I slept. Someone stood there and watched me. And then they took the photo, carried it into that hidden room, and placed it face down in the center of the floor like a message. I want to leave. I do. The smart part of me is screaming to drive away, go to a crowded place, call the police. Don't go back in there. But another thought keeps rising up, sticky and insistent. If I leave, what happens to the door? If I leave, does it stay there waiting? If I leave, does whoever made that room come out? I hate that I'm even thinking like this, like the house and I are in some kind of game. Like my choices matter to something that already knows what I'm going to do. A few minutes ago, I got out of the car because my legs were cramping and I needed air. I walked to the front of my car and tried to breathe normally. That's when I saw the note. It was tucked under my windshield wiper, pressed flat against the glass as if it had been placed there carefully. I didn't hear anyone approach. I didn't see anyone. The driveway is open, the street is quiet, but it was there, and I know it wasn't there when I first ran out because I remember staring through the windshield, hands on the wheel, trying to calm down. The note was plain white paper, no envelope. 5 words, written in neat, simple handwriting. You weren't supposed to open it yet. I read it 3 times before the meaning hit me fully. My throat tightened and I had to sit back down on the edge of the driver's seat because my knees felt like they might give out. Not supposed to. Not yet. That means someone expected me to find the door. Someone expected me to touch it. Someone expected me to be curious. And they also expected me to wait. Wait for what? For them to be ready? For whatever comes next. I'm sitting in my car again now. The note in my lap, the Polaroid on the seat beside me. Every time the wind moves a tree branch, I look up, convinced it's a person shifting behind a curtain. I keep checking my mirrors, even though the only thing behind me is my own house. I can feel the pull of that door like a physical thing, like a hook in my chest that tugs every time I try to look away. The smartest thing would be to leave and never come back. But the truth is, I don't think it would matter. Whoever did this knows where I live. They know where I work. They know where I go on weekends. They've followed me through grocery stores and parking garages and funerals. They've stood in my bedroom at 3:17 in the morning and watched me breathe. If I run, I'll just be running with the knowledge that I'm being followed. If I stay, at least I'll be facing it in a place I know. So this is what I'm doing. I'm going back inside. I'm writing this down because I need a record. Because if something happens to me, I want it to be clear that I wasn't imagining it. I want the words to exist somewhere outside my head. My hands are still shaking as I type, and I keep stopping to listen for sounds from the house, but it's quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels staged. In a minute, I'm going to open my car door. I'm going to walk up my front steps. I'm going to go down that hallway and stand in front of the door that shouldn't be there. I don't know if it will still be locked. I don't know if it will be open, waiting for me like last time. I don't know if the light bulb will flicker on again like it recognizes me. I don't know if the photos will still be on the walls or if they'll be different now, updated with new moments. And I don't know what I'll find if I look closely at the corners of those pictures. Because that's another thing I can't stop thinking about. If someone has been taking photos of me for years, then there have been other shadows, other corners, other backgrounds, other moments where something might have been standing just out of my view. I don't want to see it, but I need to know if it's always been there. If you're reading this and I don't update again, then either I didn't make it back out, or I did and I'm too afraid to tell you what I saw. Either way, if you ever wake up in a house you know well and find something new waiting in a place it shouldn't exist, don't do what I did. Don't assume you can handle it. Don't assume a lock means safety. And if you find a room full of pictures of yourself, don't look for the newest one. Because the newest one means the watcher is close. I'm going now. The note is still in my hand, and those words keep repeating in my mind like a warning and a promise at the same time. You weren't supposed to open it yet. I can't shake the feeling that the word yet is the most terrifying part. And the worst thought of all is this. If I wasn't supposed to open it yet, that means there is a time when I will be supposed to open it. Something that involves me. Something that has been waiting in my hallway, disguised as a door, pretending it's always been there. I'll update if I can. Story 6. I've been a structural damage assessor for close to 10 years. The job is exactly what it sounds like. A building gets ruined, fire, flood, gas explosion, collapse, whatever. And once the emergency crews finish their work, once the police tape comes down and the neighbors stop standing around with their hands over their mouths, I go in. I walk what's left of the structure. I take photos. I write down what's still standing and what isn't. I document where the damage starts, where it spreads, and which parts are safe enough to step on without ending up in the basement. Then I write a report that tells the county, the contractor, or the insurance company what they really want to know. Can it be repaired, or does it need to be torn down? It's not dramatic work most days. I'm not a firefighter. I'm not rescue. I show up after the worst part is already over, when the building is quiet and nobody is crying in the street anymore. Most of the time, the only sounds are my boots on debris and the occasional drip of water from a broken pipe. I go in alone. I come out alone. I write the report and move on to the next address. 10 years of that does something to your brain, but not the way people think. People assume you must carry all those destroyed homes around with you, like you're collecting tragedies. It goes the other direction. After a while, a destroyed building is just a destroyed building. You stop seeing what it used to be. You stop imagining birthday parties in the living room or a kid's height marks on the doorframe. You see load paths, collapsed beams, burn patterns. You see what's holding and what's about to give. You learn how to make yourself calm in places that don't want to stay standing. You learn how to move quickly without rushing. You learn to trust your eyes and your feet. I'm telling you all this because I need someone else to know what's been happening. I need it written down somewhere outside my head, because inside my head it keeps trying to rearrange itself into something normal. The first house was in February. Gas leak, the kind that builds up quietly until one spark turns the kitchen into a bomb. The kitchen and most of the ground floor were destroyed, and the upstairs looked like nothing had happened except for smoke staining and the fact that every window had been blown out. I've seen that pattern 100 times. An explosion follows the easiest way out, and the pressure vents upward and outward. Sometimes the first floor gets erased, and the second floor just sits there like it's confused, structurally sound, totally exposed. I did my usual walkthrough. I documented the lower floor first, noted the compromised load-bearing wall on the north side, marked the area near the stairwell as unsafe because the support had shifted. Then I went upstairs to check the second floor. 3 bedrooms. 2 of them were exactly what I expected: smoke damage, cracked drywall where the ceiling had moved slightly, dresser drawers thrown open from the blast pressure, a closet door hanging off one hinge, that kind of thing. The normal mess of a home interrupted. The 3rd bedroom at the end of the hall was different. I remember pausing at the threshold because it didn't fit the rest of the house. It wasn't even that it was clean, it was untouched. Like the destruction had stopped politely at the door and decided not to come in. The bed was made with a dark green comforter pulled tight, the corners tucked in with that hotel neatness. A nightstand sat beside it with a glass of water and an ashtray. Next to the ashtray was a pack of cigarettes and a lighter placed like someone had lined them up. There was no dust on the glass, no ash scattered, no sign anyone had rushed out, no clothes on the floor, no half-open drawers. Just that perfect arrangement like a staged room in a furniture store. I did what I always do. I noted it in my report. Structurally sound room, personal effects undisturbed, recommend contents evaluation before demolition. I photographed it from the doorway and from both corners, got the window, got the ceiling, got the floor near the bedposts. Then I moved on. I didn't think about it again. Not really. It was odd, sure, but odd things happen in damaged buildings. A fire will destroy one room and leave a photo frame on the wall untouched. A blast will flatten a kitchen and leave a row of cups standing upright in a cabinet. Randomness is normal in my line of work. I forgot about that room until March. The second house was an electrical fire on the east side of the county, in an older neighborhood with narrow streets and mature trees. The fire started inside the walls and ran the wiring like a fuse. By the time anyone smelled smoke, the structure was already burning from the inside out. When the fire trucks arrived, there wasn't much they could save. The first floor was mostly gone. The east wing had collapsed. The west wing was still standing. I went through it room by room. I documented smoke penetration and heat damage to ceiling joists. I tested the floor with my weight in the safe spots and marked 3 areas where the subfloor felt soft, compromised by water and heat. I took photos of blackened studs and bubbled paint and the way the stair railing had warped. And then I got to the end of the hall. There was a bedroom door, closed. I opened it, a made bed with a dark green comforter pulled tight, a nightstand with a glass of water and an ashtray, a pack of cigarettes next to a lighter. For a second, I honestly thought I'd mixed up my addresses, like I'd somehow come back to the February house without realizing it. But the hallway behind me was different. The smell was different. The light coming through the window was different. The neighborhood was on the other side of the county. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have. In my work, standing still too long in a damaged building is a bad habit. It's how you stop paying attention to what might shift. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to the photos from February. Same comforter, same shade of green, same ashtray, same glass. Same arrangement on the nightstand, cigarettes and lighter placed at the same angle. Even the way the comforter was pulled tight looked identical, like it had been made by the same person with the same hands. I did what any reasonable person would do. I tried to talk myself out of it. Dark green comforters are common. A lot of smokers keep their cigarettes on the nightstand. A lot of people keep a glass of water by the bed. It's a basic arrangement. If you walked into 100 bedrooms, you'd see the same items. Coincidence. That was the word I kept saying to myself as I took the required photos. Coincidence and nothing else. I finished my report. I drove home. I told myself I was being stupid and that my brain was just looking for patterns because it's trained to do that. April proved me wrong. The third house was flood damage from a burst main downtown. It was one of those narrow 3-story buildings that used to have a shop on the ground floor and apartments above. The street-level area was gutted. The first and second floors had significant water damage. Warped flooring, swollen baseboards, drywall that crumbled when you touched it. Mold was already forming in the corners. The air smelled like wet paper and old wood. I worked my way up slowly because flood damage makes buildings tricky. Everything looks fine until it isn't. Water finds every weakness. It rots the parts you can't see. You learn to trust the signs, the way a floor flexes, the way a wall sounds when you knock on it. By the time I reached the third floor, I was annoyed more than anything. It was going to be a full loss, and I knew it. I just needed the documentation. The hallway on the top floor was narrow and dim. At the end of it was a door. I knew before I opened it that it would be there. That was the moment my body started reacting ahead of my thoughts. My chest tightened. I remember swallowing hard. My hand felt colder on the doorknob. I opened the door anyway. It was the same room, same bed, same dark green comforter, same nightstand, same glass of water, same ashtray, same cigarettes, same lighter. But it wasn't perfect this time. The comforter was pulled up, but not as tightly. One pillow had a slight depression in it, like someone had been lying there and got up, then made the bed quickly without smoothing everything out. Like they'd tried, but they'd been in a hurry. And in the ashtray, there was a cigarette, half smoked. The ash was intact, not disturbed, as if it had been set down and abandoned seconds earlier. The cigarette didn't look wet from the flood air, didn't look crushed or knocked over by the building's damage. It looked recent. It looked like a moment frozen. I took photographs for a long time. Too long. I knew I was doing it and I couldn't stop. Like if I documented every inch, I would find the trick, the seam, the explanation. I measured the room. I measured the distance between the bed and the wall, between the nightstand and the bed, the height of the window. I checked the wallpaper. And that's when it got worse. Because the wallpaper wasn't just similar. It matched my photos from the previous two houses exactly. There was a faded patch near the window, like sunlight had bleached it over time. There was a place near the door where the paper had lifted slightly at the seam. Those weren't generic details. Those were specific, like fingerprints. I left the building with my hands shaking just enough that I had to pretend I was cold. That night at home, I searched the wallpaper pattern online. I found it after an hour of digging through old forums and archived catalog images. It was discontinued in 1987. The manufacturer didn't exist anymore. The company had been bought and renamed and eventually shut down. You couldn't buy that paper new, not unless someone had rolls sitting in a basement for decades. I filed my report for the flood building the next day. I decided not to mention the room. I told myself it would sound insane. I told myself I was protecting my credibility. But the truth was simpler. Writing it down in an official report would make it real in a way I couldn't undo. I didn't sleep well that night. In May, I got another assignment. A residential fire at the outer edge of the county, a single-family home with heavy damage and a partial roof collapse. Normal work. Normal day. I almost didn't go in. I sat in my truck in front of the house for 15 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the blackened frame. I watched the way the wind moved through broken windows. I could see char on the studs and pieces of insulation stuck to everything like dirty snow. The place looked dead and open. I told myself I was being dramatic. Then I told myself I was being cautious. Then I told myself it didn't matter what I called it, because I had a job to do. I went in. I did the lower floor first, the usual motions. Photos, notes, measurements, quick checks for structural stability. I kept my writing in shorthand like always, but my handwriting was tighter than normal. I moved quickly, not rushing, but like someone trying to get through a task before something changes its mind. Then I went upstairs. End of the hall, I could feel my pulse in my throat when I reached the door. I told myself, just open it. Just prove it's not there. Just let your brain calm down once it sees an ordinary destroyed bedroom. I opened it. Of course it was there, the same room, the same bed, the same comforter, the same nightstand. But this time, something was different in a way that made the air feel thin. The mattress. At first, I didn't understand why my eyes stuck on it. It was covered in sheets, the comforter pulled tight, everything arranged the same way. But I knew that shape. I knew the way the corners sat. I knew how that particular mattress looked under fabric, the slight unevenness on one side where I'd slept for years before rotating it. I stepped closer without meaning to. My boots made a soft sound on the floor, and it felt too loud in that intact room. I pulled the comforter back just enough to see the tag. I know my own mattress. I bought it 4 years ago when my back started giving me trouble from a pinched nerve, and I couldn't keep pretending my old one was fine. I remembered the brand, the model name, the way the salesperson had talked me into it like it was an investment. This mattress had the same tag. I took a photo of it, hands unsteady. I left the house. I drove home. I went upstairs to my bedroom and checked my own mattress. Same model, same manufacture date. I stood there staring at it, waiting for my brain to offer me something. Some explanation that didn't make me feel like I was slipping off the edge of reality. I tried to think of all the reasonable possibilities. I couldn't find one that held up. I poured myself a drink and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, not turning on the TV, not checking my phone, just listening to my refrigerator hum and the occasional car passing outside. Then I told myself there were probably thousands of those mattresses in the county. I said it out loud like that would make it true, and I went to bed. Last week, they sent me the fifth house. By then, I knew before I even arrived what would happen. I knew before I parked the truck, before I got my gear, before I walked up to the entrance. I'd known since the fourth house that this was where it was going. And still I went in. I don't know why. Professional pride, maybe. Habit. Or something uglier, like the part of me that needed to see it even if it ruined me. The building was on the east side of Hoseka, in a neighborhood where the lots are wide and the trees are old. The damage was severe. I don't even remember the official cause they told me. Something structural, something sudden, something that left rooms exposed and corners broken open like a dollhouse. The air had a sweet smell to it, not smoke or mold. Clover. I noticed that smell because it didn't belong in a destroyed building. I did the walkthrough like always. My notes were neat, careful. I documented cracked supports and shifted framing and marked dangerous areas. My brain kept trying to make this normal by focusing on the work. If I focused hard enough, maybe the thing waiting upstairs wouldn't matter. But of course, it did. Upstairs, end of the hall. I stopped in front of the door and stood there, hand hovering, feeling like I was about to open a door in my own house in the dark. I opened it. The room was mine. Not just similar, not close. Mine. The landscape print I'd had since my mom died was on the wall in the exact spot where I'd hung it years ago. I kept that print because she gave it to me, not because I even like it. I've never told anyone that. It's just one of those private facts you carry around. Seeing it there made my stomach drop because it meant this wasn't a pattern of generic objects anymore. It was reaching into my life. The fitted sheet had the bleach stain, a specific stain in a specific shape, from last summer when I spilled cleaning solution and didn't notice until laundry day. I remember being annoyed at myself. I remember thinking I should just replace the sheet, then not bothering because it still worked fine. Nobody else could have that exact stain in that exact spot unless it was the same sheet. I was still trying to breathe like a normal person, still trying to stay standing, when I realized the bed was occupied. There was someone in it. I couldn't see the face. The figure was on its side, turned away from the door, the comforter pulled up. But I could see the build, the shoulders, the length of the body, the way the blanket rose and fell slightly with breathing. It was my shape. On the pillow, I could see hair, my hair. And the posture was exactly how I sleep when I'm exhausted. One arm tucked under the pillow like I'm trying to hold my own head in place. I stood in that doorway for a long time. I don't know how long enough that my legs started to ache. Long enough that the silence began to feel like pressure. The person in the bed didn't move, didn't turn, didn't react to the door opening. I didn't step inside. I closed the door very quietly, like I was trying not to wake it, and I walked back down the hall and out of the building and into daylight. I got in my truck. I drove home. I don't remember most of the drive. I remember stopping at a light and realizing my hands were gripping the wheels so hard they hurt. I remember the feeling of my jaw locked tight. I remember thinking, over and over, don't look in the rearview mirror like that would make something appear there. Now I'm writing this from my kitchen table. It's 11 o'clock at night. I came home tonight, walked upstairs, and stood in my bedroom doorway for a long time without stepping in. I had that same tightness in my chest, the same feeling of standing at the end of a hallway in a ruined house. The bed is made. I never make my bed. Not like that. I'll pull the comforter up sometimes if someone is coming over, but I don't tuck corners. I don't smooth wrinkles. I don't make it look untouched. My bed looks untouched. The nightstand is clear. No charger cable, no glass of water, No clutter, the random receipts I always mean to throw away are gone. My normal mess is gone, like it was never there. The bleach-stained sheet is gone. The mattress is made up with sheets I don't recognize, tucked tight at the corners. Too tight. My bedroom looks like a room nobody lives in. It looks like the room I found the first time, in February. The one that didn't belong in a destroyed house because it looked like nobody had ever slept there. It looks prepared, like someone just stepped out. I haven't gone in yet. I'm still downstairs, sitting at my kitchen table writing this, because writing feels like putting a hand on a railing. Something solid, something that keeps me from tipping over. I don't know where I've been sleeping. I don't know how long I've been gone. That sounds impossible. I know it does. But that's the truth of how it feels standing here right now, thinking about that occupied bed in Osaka and this untouched bed upstairs in my own home. Tomorrow, I'm going to call my friend Dave. We're supposed to get beers on Saturday anyway. Dave has known me long enough to tell when I'm off, and he's the kind of person who will say it plainly. I think I just need someone to look at me and tell me I seem like myself. Because right now, I'm not sure I'm the one who came home.